Hi, this is Natalie Hoffman of FlyingFreeNow.com, and you're listening to the Flying Free Podcast, a support resource for women of faith looking for hope and healing from hidden emotional and spiritual abuse. Welcome to episode 56 of the Flying Free Podcast. You guys, I am so excited to have Gretchen with us again. She has been with us a couple of times in the past, talking about her upcoming book last year, but her book is now out, and she agreed to come and do a couple of podcasts, one today and then one in a few weeks, talking about divorce. And her book is called Lifesaving Divorce. And it is I just got my copy in the mail this week, and it is absolutely phenomenal. I just started reading it last night, and I cannot put it down. Well, I had to because I got too tired, but it is so good. Gretchen, welcome to the podcast again.
Thank you so much, Natalie. And it was great meeting you recently, and it's just inspiring to be around you. So I'm happy to be here.
Oh, I feel the same about you. So for those of you who maybe didn't hear earlier podcast episodes, where I interviewed Gretchen, I found Gretchen on Twitter, and she was tweeting all of these. By the way, what is your Twitter handle in case people want to jump on there?
It's Gretchen Baskerville.
Okay, so Gretchen Baskerville, and she, her tweets were like crazy good, and so and they were all about, they were about divorce and from a Christian perspective, and they were just so profound. And I started following her, and I realized that she was tweeting all these great tweets because she was actually writing this book. And so I'm, in the process of her researching, she was putting out some of these great tweets, and I thought, man alive, if this book is like her tweets, this is going to be an amazing book. And so I interviewed her a couple of times last year. I should have come prepared. You know what I'll do? I'll put in the notes, I'll put links to her past podcasts so you can listen to what she's said in the past. And then she also did a expert workshop in the Flying Free Sisterhood group, which is a locked group. But if you are interested in finding out more, you can find out more at joinflyingfree.com. Anyway, she did an expert workshop in there called the 90-Day Escape Plan, where she explains all the steps that there were like 40. How many steps were there?
Yeah, it was like 40 or 50.
Yeah, there were like a lot of steps, but they weren't all, overwhelming or anything. But, if you followed those steps in 90 days, you could be really, really prepared to file for divorce if that's what you wanted to do. So, but anyways, I want to, Gretchen, we got 3 questions from people on the Facebook page about, questions that had to do with divorce. And I thought,
sure,
you are the perfect person to ask. And I also wanted to just remind people about you and just let people know that your book is now out. It's on Amazon.com. It's called The Lifesaving Divorce by Gretchen Baskerville. It's written from a Christian perspective. Gretchen has years and years of experience working with women who have been divorced or women who are in the process of being divorced because we're talking life-saving divorce this year. So without any further ado, Gretchen, I'm going to ask you your first question, okay?
Shoot, let's go for it.
All right. How do you explain things to your children during and after divorce? My children are 8 and 10, and while they don't need to know the gory details, I want them to know and understand that what they've seen their whole lives is not normal. It's not healthy, and it's not love. But I don't want to teach them to disparage their father either. So what would you tell this woman?
Right. So if I were face to face with this woman, I'd ask a lot of questions about, what kind of information does she want to shield her kids from right now? The fact that she's talking about this, the fact that she's asking this question tells me that she actually has really good intuition, and her guts are telling her that things aren't age appropriate to discuss with her kids. And I agree with her. I was in a situation just like this. My ex-husband was involved with a lot of immoral activities, and my little children were around preschool age, and it just wasn't appropriate to say anything. They didn't observe it. Okay, so that's the big key. Is there something they're observing? And if they didn't observe it, then you have a different direction you want to go. Let's say that they are observing things. For example, I'm not sure what this woman is facing, but she talks about, their whole lives haven't been normal. What they've been seeing isn't healthy or loving. They're going to figure out uh, healthy and loving relationships just from being in your home and then going back and forth between your home and your ex's home. So that almost doesn't need to be discussed from the standpoint of what's healthy and what's not, because they're just going to feel it, just going from house to house. But let's talk about the situation where there are activities going on that they had no knowledge of. What do you do about that? Let's say there were affairs. Let's say there was child porn viewing. Let's say that there were other, maybe even felonies going on, or other kinds of felonies, because of course that's already a felony. I would say that as a mom, I knew as a mom that someday my kids might want to know more about the divorce. And even at that age, they would ask me questions and I thought, oh, I don't want to go there. That's just not age appropriate. But someday it will be age appropriate. And I figured that age would be 21. And so it is part of their life story. You can't keep this stuff hidden. If you try to keep it hidden, they will eventually hear it from someone else if you don't tell them. Mm-hmm. So it's best if you can keep the line of communication open and control the version of the story they hear, right? Because otherwise, their friends, your friends, kids, they'll hear it from other people. So you really want to agree with them that what happened in this family was really bad, that you forgave over and over. But at some point you had to draw the line and say, this bad behavior is continuing and I need to, get us out of this situation. Mm-hmm. So what I told my kids is when they turned 21, they could ask any question they wanted and I would answer completely truthfully. And so that's what I did. I did have a lot of immoral things going on that just weren't appropriate for a 4-year-old and 6-year-old. And they each asked me, and I told them the truth. I even kept 2 big banker's boxes full of documents if they ever wanted to see them. Neither of them wanted to see them. They just wanted to hear from me, my version of the story. And believe it or not, the older one said, oh, okay, I think I had overheard you talking on the phone. So this jives with what I kind of thought was going on. And the other one said, oh my goodness, I had no idea. But because he was older, he was able to absorb it better. And we talked the next day and I said, how are you dealing with this? And he said, Mom, I'm okay with it. If I have other questions, I'll ask you, but I just want you to know, thank you for divorcing Dad. And that was really important.
Wow. So that's really good. In my situation, I'll just throw this out for whatever it's worth. I made a huge mistake when I didn't get out of my relationship until I had 9 kids. And so some of them were older, like in their late teens, early 20s. And I didn't, because I waited so long to get out thinking, and also because I thought that divorce wasn't an option. If I would have had your book, this would have really opened up my eyes to see, whoa, this is so pathological. I need to get out, not only for my sake, but for the sake of my kids. But I didn't know that. And so right. I actually, because my kids actually observed so much of my ex-husband's behaviors, because he treated them the same way he was treating me. And it wasn't sexual. It was just covert, passive aggressive kind of behaviors. They were experiencing the same kinds of stuff. So we actually triangulated. Do you know what I'm saying? We talked about their dad and what he was doing to us. And that was not healthy for any of us. I mean, I think it's good to talk about things, but I was really using them as a sounding board because I wasn't allowed in the church to, quote unquote, gossip about my husband. So those of us who were living in the environment, we talked amongst each other. And looking back, I wish I would have had somebody else outside of the family to talk to, so that I could have actually
Right.
just been a support to my kids instead of using my older kids as a sounding board for my emotional trauma. Okay. So
Right.
if you are in that situation and you're using your older kids that way, you is better read Gretchen's book and find out that there's actually a healthier way to deal with an emotionally abusive relationship. There's a healthier
Right.
way to
Right.
protect yourself and your kids. So, and then too, I wanted to add that for my younger kids, when I did finally file for divorce and get out, um, I read them books. You can get books at the library that talk about
Mm.
divorce in general, so that it kind of normalizes the whole divorce process for them, so they don't feel
Mm.
like, oh, our family's the only one that's ever gone through this, which is a complete lie. But also, whenever my kids come home from their dad's house, just like Gretchen said, they come home from their dad's house and they tell me, I don't even ask them, because honestly, the things they tell me are super triggering for me. So I don't ask them, but they offer, because they trust me, they tell me what happens over there. And then I always just ask them, how does that make you feel? And what have you
Mm.
learned from these behaviors? What are some ways that you can respond to protect yourself from these kinds of behaviors, just so that they're not denying it or not pretending like it's okay for adults to treat people like this.
Mhm.
I want them to know it's not okay, but I want them to come to those conclusions, not me. You don't have to even bad talk your ex-husband. All you have to do is just listen to what your kids are saying and validate their experiences, because that's what they need. They need to know, this really happened. Yes, my dad really does say these things. Yes, my dad really does treat me this way. And no, it's not appropriate. So,
Right. Right. No, I appreciate your insight, because you did have older kids where I had younger kids, and it does really make a difference. And yeah,
well, yeah. And
good.
what they're dealing with, obviously, you're not going to be, talking about sexual issues with your younger kids. That's just a no-brainer. But I think a lot of people are dealing with just that, just the undercurrent of passive aggressive behavior that's just always present, or the walking on eggshells, and their kids are dealing with that too and just not sure. Yeah. So anyway, it gets complicated, but let's go on to the next question. Um, so Gretchen, how did you rebuild your life, or how do you suggest that a person go about the process of rebuilding their lives as a single person after their divorce? Because you were single for a long time. So, and you know what? This I think was one of the topics of a podcast that you did. The entire podcast was on rebuilding your life as a single person. But why don't we
Right.
touch on that now, and then people can go and hear more details in that other podcast.
Yeah, I think that was episode 33, because I was a single for 20 years after divorcing. I didn't
Yeah.
expect that as a devout Christian. That was not part of my game plan, for sure. But I'll
Mhm.
tell you, when I look at those years, I think, wow, how rich, meaningful, purposeful. I'm married now. I married about 3 years ago, but wow, those years were amazing. So let me, I thought, since we've already done a whole podcast on that, I thought, well, let's just try to break it down to maybe a 5-minute explanation. But um, depending on where you are with, God or faith, one of the first things I recommend doing is finding an affirmation or a Bible verse to put up on your mirror or your fridge, something that says that, maybe Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He's walking with me through the valley of the shadow of death. Or verses like 1 Peter 5:7, casting all your cares on him because he cares for you. So I like having a little affirmation that I just say in the morning and say before I go to bed.
Mm.
And then second, it's well known that the first 2 years of divorce are just really painful, and there's a logistical reason for that. first of all, divorce just involves so many changes. There's moving, there's legal documents, there's school, there's your kids' feelings, there's maybe moving to a new school, there's setting up new bank accounts, doing your taxes, finding a better job. There's the friction between you and your ex. So all these factors, which would have been easy if it had taken place over 10 years. You would have been able to handle all these things if you had, years to handle them. But when you compress them into 1 or 2 years, it's incredibly stressful.
Mm-hmm.
And so be gentle on yourself those first 1 or 2 years. Just say, you know what? I know these are the bad years. I'm gonna just keep trudging on, and eventually I'm going to start seeing some light at the end of the tunnel. I usually tell people that the first 6 months are horrible. By the end of the first year, you should be able to smile. By the end of the second year, you should be able to, laugh and start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But all of this is predicated on whether or not you're safe. So getting safe is really your top goal, getting you and your kids safe if you can. And then do expect to be happier. If you have exited from a long abusive marriage, say, for years, your chances of being happier are actually quite good. And researchers, Hawkins and Booth, way back in 2005, discovered that after these long abusive marriages, where there's a lot of passive aggressiveness, there may be violence, there's a lot of walking on eggshells, that you actually will come out happier. And if you choose to remarry, if that's something you'd really like to do, your remarriage is likely to be happy after a long, unhappy, destructive marriage. So that's a good news. Fourth, I would say find your voice. When you've been in an abusive relationship, you don't have a voice. You have told yourself to stay quiet, and your spouse has told you to stay quiet. So revel in you're in making your own decisions without interference from someone else. I mean, if you want to paint your kitchen pink, do that. I found myself doing spending money on things that other people were even like repairs. It's like, oh wow, I finally get to put a brand new roof on this house without having to consult my ex-husband. I am so thrilled. And people were saying, that roof is going to cost you thousands of dollars. Why are you so happy? But I had my own voice. I had my own agency, and I could make my own decision without interference from him. And I'll tell you, that was just great. So really enjoy that. Lean into finding your own voice and your own agency.
Yes.
Go for it.
No, I was just going to piggyback off of that thought that, a lot of times we get our identity from other people, especially if we've been in a marriage like that. We get our identity from our church, from our ministry, from our spouse, from our friends. And then when we're all of a sudden we're single, we realize, oh my gosh, who am I? Everyone else made decisions for me. I looked to other people for the direction for my life. And now I'm by myself. Who in the world am I? And sometimes we try to fill that uncomfortable gap or uncomfortable feeling by looking for somebody else to validate us, to hold up a mirror so we can see ourselves again. And I think that's it's a golden opportunity to do some serious deep healing inside of yourself so that you get your identity from Christ for sure, but also from who he made you, that you are strong just by yourself, that you are comfortable in your own skin, that you can go to a restaurant and have dinner by yourself or go to the movie theater and have a date night with yourself. And you actually feel really happy about doing that. I don't know. I think if you can get to that place too, you'll be in a healthier place to then get into a new relationship as well, because then you're no longer looking to use someone for your, to reflect who you are, but you're already strong in yourself, and you'll be able to give to someone, and you'll be able to look for someone who is also strong in themselves. You'll be more attracted to that kind of person, and they'll be more attracted to you. So I don't know. That's just another little.
Yeah,
I didn't mean to interrupt. I feel like
no.
Go ahead. Do you have more things?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, good. Awesome.
You mentioned, that you were, told, not to gossip. But the truth of the matter is, one of the most healing things after trauma, the trauma of being in an abusive relationship for a long time, is telling your story to save people. Because the way you stayed in this abusive relationship was covering it up and hiding it, and that destroys you, your psyche, your sanity, your physical health. So it's time to start telling your story to safe people, right? The operative word is safe people. Find some
Yeah.
resilient friends who've walked in your shoes. About 1 in 4 people of faith have ever divorced. And so there's a good chance there might be someone who will surprise you, who will be a really great listening ear. None of us want to whine, about the perils of marriage to our single friends or to our children, of course. And we've already discussed that. And we don't want to be a burden to our married friends, but this is our story. It is our truth. And we do need to find someone safe to share it with. And then I would say definitely get active with the survivor community. Get active with Natalie's group. There are, yeah, I think Natalie is unusually gifted in this area, but there's all kinds of secret Facebook groups that may even offer you support in an area that is specific to what you faced in your marriage. So if it was gambling, or whether it was child porn, or whether it was infidelity, or maybe something else. There are actually secret Facebook pages or groups that focus on those kinds of specifics. And then, of course, get therapy. I wanted to share one story if we have time.
Yeah.
Would that be okay? Okay,
Oh, yeah.
so Judith Herman's book, Trauma and Recovery, is sort of the landmark book on trauma. And in her book, she tells the story of 2 World War II doctors who discovered that even the strongest and toughest soldier would have trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, if they were in combat for 240 days. So imagine that if the combat that happens in an abusive marriage for 20 years is a lot closer to 7,000 days of combat, you have really been through a lot. You have many people I've interviewed have post-traumatic stress disorder, or even complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And you really need to find a good therapist and a support group, and perhaps group therapy. And if you can't afford a therapist, and I know many, many people listening to this podcast cannot, talk to the other survivors in these abuse groups. Natalie's is top notch, and watch for the secret groups on Facebook. But you're going to need some therapy after 7,000 days of combat. You have the fact that your health isn't great, the fact that mentally you're really exhausted, the fact that, the whole idea of standing another day and fighting isn't something you think you can do. That's understandable because of what you've been through.
Mm-hmm. That makes me think of, at the beginning of your book, you talk about how so many women are, they are actually, by the time they're thinking about killing themselves, that's when okay, it's time for a life-saving, literally life-saving divorce. Because that's not, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because there are so many women who don't understand why they are physically falling apart, like literally mentally, emotionally, and physically completely falling apart. They don't understand the dire circumstances that they are in, and that they are actually dealing with something that's just as traumatic as seeing an accident happen, or only they've been dealing with it for such a long, long time. And the healing process is obviously not going to happen overnight. So a lot of people think too, I've been I hear this so much. I've been divorced now for a year or 2 years, and I still just feel so sad. I still feel like I'm just stuck. Well, this is a long road of recovery. And when you've been brainwashed, I really believe it's an insidious form of brainwashing to rewire your brain and to get healthy. And a lot of these people who are still stuck, they really haven't gotten the help that they need. because they haven't known how. They haven't really known how, they haven't really understood the ramifications of what they've been through. But once you start getting help, it takes a long time, but you can get better. And Gretchen, you've seen this over and over happen with the women that you've worked with.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
So another question that people have is how, they're really scared of losing everything in a divorce.
Sure.
And you do lose a lot, but you have practical tips. I know, because I've heard them. And I'm sure I have only started your book, but I'm sure you talk about this in your book too. What are some ways that people can sort of preempt losing or make minimize the losses, I guess? What are some ways they can prepare to do that?
Right. So you're absolutely right. I've redone the tips and they're already part of your sisterhood video, and I've put them in the book. And so you can see the various tips on how to be proactive as you look toward the future and I think this may be going to divorce. First of all, and I did interview a Christian divorce attorney, and I said, what are the common mistakes that women make in divorce? And so he gave me, the most common ones, and they're in the book. But I would say, for the purpose of this podcast, number one, get an attorney. If you actually have assets. Now, if you have no assets, no kids, you could probably pretty much do this, at the courthouse, and it's going to be easy, and the forms aren't going to be that expensive. Also, if you're disabled, by the way, in my city, in my county, if you're disabled, you can get your divorce handled free, which is unbelievable. Because divorce can be a little bit expensive. But number one is get an attorney. Don't think that if your spouse has always been abusive, they're going to be abusive through the divorce process too. And you need that attorney to protect you and to help you. But having said that, number two is be proactive in your case. So your attorney is handling other cases. The mediator is handling other cases. The judge is handling other cases. In fact, that mediator and judge may actually be handling 1,000 different cases this year alone. And that means that they may overlook something. So you need to be on top of it. You need to keep reminding them of the facts of the situation. You need to put on your detective hat and find those facts and just be involved. Be proactive. Don't sit there and hope that someone's going to rescue you, because even if their intention is good, they want to rescue you, they've got a billion other people that they're interacting with too, and they may forget something really important from your case. Number three is treat your divorce as businesslike as possible and keep the emotions out of it as much as possible. One of the biggest mistakes this Christian divorce attorney was telling me is so many people want to make this about the infidelity, or so many people want to make this about the abuse. Just don't go there. That we have no fault divorce in every state in the U.S. This is not the time to try to lambaste and your spouse in court. Just get out of there with your money and your sanity as fast as you can. So ask your attorney right up front, even when you're interviewing, based on so you bring in your asset sheet, you bring out in how much money your spouse makes, how much money you make, and say, hey, attorney, based on these assets, my house, the cars, maybe a business, how much spousal and child support do you think I can get and why? And how much of these assets do you think I can get and why? Because almost every state has some kind of guidelines that they consider to be fair. So you should kind of expect to get about 50-50, 60-40 in the worst case. But, these states have you're not the first human being to go through a divorce in this state. The state kind of wants this to be fair. They kind of want it to be 50-50, but you need to talk to your attorney about your own state and your own situation on how you get to fairness. And that's what you're aiming for. You want this to be businesslike, and you want to get half of your assets and get out of there so you can rebuild your life. So,
I've heard that judges don't like drama. So if
No, they do
you're
not.
coming to the table with drama, they will already be unfavorably disposed toward you, and you don't want your judge to have bad feelings towards you.
Yeah, be as businesslike as you possibly can. Treat it as if you and your spouse are business partners and you just want to split the assets and move on. If your spouse doesn't use like overtly hostile tactics, maybe their tactics are more like stonewalling and ignoring you and not engaging. This is the time to just make it all business, not personal. Just move forward. Also, I mentioned it, but this is not the place to get justice or moral vindication or punish your bad spouse in court. Just focus on having peace and safety and a fair division of assets. If you do have a dangerous spouse, I do have a whole section at the end of chapter 7 on these vitriolic, vengeful, angry spouses and divorces where there's parental alienation. In other words, your spouse is actively trying to turn the kids against you. Then you're going to want to be documenting the lies and the threats and the accusations, and doing that in written form, and then showing those to your attorney. And I've also, for those of you in that situation where you've got someone who's extremely hostile, I've got a whole list of books on my website on books on hostile divorces, parental alienation. And there's just some excellent ones out there. You're not reinventing the wheel. You're not the first person to go through a hostile divorce against a narcissist or sociopath. There are lots of books written on how to do this and how to do it well and come out with your sanity and your assets if possible.
And what is the URL of your website?
Okay, so it's lifesavingdivorce.com. Links is the links page is my page that has all the best book recommendations. Of course, Natalie's is in there. But section 10 on my links page, again, that's lifesavingdivorce.com. That section 10 on the links page is will give you the tried and true excellent books on dealing with hostile vengeful divorces. And these are unusual divorces. This doesn't happen all the time. This is only 1 in 10 of divorces that go to court are this bad. So you're going to need people around you to understand that and to give you, love and care and support.
This is really good stuff. Really good stuff. Okay, so Gretchen, we are going to be having you back again to talk more about your book, but I want to close by just letting people know her book is meaty. Like how many pages is it? Do you know?
It's like 440 pages.
Yeah, it's huge.
Crazy.
But it's so good. I mean, it's gold. So I'm seriously, I'm going to be telling everybody about this book. It's going to be one of my number one resources that I recommend to people. So go get her book. It's on Amazon right now, Life-Saving Divorce by Gretchen Baskerville. Check out her website. I'll have all the links in the show notes here. And we're going to be bringing her back in a few weeks to talk about her book. I'd like to kind of go into your book and talk about all the different things that you've covered. She's done tons of research. She's totally done her homework. She's, I want to say badass. I hope that's okay with you, Gretchen. You're badass. And I just really think that this book is going to open the doors to prepare women, really prepare them for walking through divorce, as well as for women who have already been divorced. And you know what else? If you are listening to this podcast, or if you know of someone who is a people helper, who wants to have a better understanding of what divorce for people of faith looks like, what it should look like, and how to support people of faith who are walking through life-saving divorces, please let them know about this podcast. Let them know about her book. I think we need to get this in as many hands as possible. I really think this book is going to start shifting the culture in our churches and in our faith communities. I really do. So thank you so much, Gretchen, for writing the book. You took a long time. How long did it take you to?
About 3 years.
Yeah. And, so it's 3 years of writing and researching, but also 20 years of experience behind her before she even wrote it. So it's a high quality book. And I just cannot say enough good things about it. But We will talk more about the book in a few weeks. And otherwise, thank you so much for joining us, Gretchen.
You're very welcome.
Until next time, fly free.